Okay, welcome to Westminster. Another very special guest today. It's the former Brexit Party MEP and entrepreneur, Rupert Lowe. Rupert, how the devil are you, sir?
Well, good morning, Michael. It's a joy to see your smiling face again since our departure from the European Parliament, which I know was fun while it lasted, but sadly it all came to an end. And the downside is we don't see each other as much as we used to.
Well, Rupert, look, we've got to start there, of course, with Brexit. I've got to tell you, there's a lot of support on this channel in the comments from people, and thanks a lot for those comments, guys. Keep them coming. On the government's approach now, we saw yesterday the introduction of the internal market bill, overriding parts of the withdrawal agreement. Rupert, where do you assess where we are in terms of Brexit and the government's approach?
Well, we did tell Boris that the withdrawal agreement and the political declaration were not fit for purpose, but I think everybody had so much Brexit fatigue at the time that they really didn't want to listen. And Boris, just as he said, wanted to get Brexit done. And I think the reality of the deficiency of those agreements in terms of, if you like, on behalf of the British taxpayer and the British voter, has now become evident, even for everybody in government. And they're now trying to, if you like, put a sticking plaster on those deficiencies. As we all know, the best deal for Britain is no deal. We leave with no deal, and with our trade deficit with Europe, we will end up cutting a far better deal as a sovereign nation. And the EU, ultimately, unless they want to cut their nose off to spite their face, and they want to damage the interests of their 500 million constituents, they will need to do a deal with us. So anybody who, with a grain of intelligence, would not basically listen to what the Remainers are saying. Ultimately, what they need to do is get our hands doing the work and negotiating a sensible deal for the British people, which I'm confident could be done by a very small group of sensible people.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's a lot of project fear out there still about no deal, Rupert. Can you just lay out why you think that would be the best approach for the government to take?
Well, but ultimately, the best deal for all of us is to do a proper free trade deal with Europe. Now, whether that's on a Canada-style basis or whether it's a refined Canada-style basis, the job of politicians, both in Europe and the UK, must be to do what's in the best economic interests of all of the constituents, and that's our voters and their voters. So logic says it should be possible, after the relationship we've had with them, after the fact that we've been part of the European Union for so long, we've been a major financial contributor. Logic says they should respect the fact our people have voted to take back their sovereignty. We should do a free trade deal. That is the responsible course of action. If they want to be irresponsible because they're trying to run this protectionist scam in Europe, ultimately, then the best deal for us, who has a trade deficit of about 100 billion with Europe, ultimately, the best thing is for us is to leave with no deal, because what we don't want to do is be fettered in the way in which we interact with the rest of the world. That's absolutely crucial. And you're seeing, our friends and allies from the rest of the world, particularly from the Anglo-Saxon zone in terms of Australia, New Zealand, the USA, Canada, that there is already a lot of action taking place in terms of doing trade deals. Even Japan is keen to do a trade deal with us. We are a major consumer. We've got a huge consumer base, and people want to do trade with the UK. So I don't fear no deal. The thing I fear most is the incompetence of our government and the incompetence of the civil service that supports them. Not only incompetent, they're malign in that they have this view of Britain as a sort of busted flush. And since they've been dismantling our empire and our Commonwealth, ultimately what they've been doing is they've become surrender monkeys. They've become weak, and they're not doing what they should be doing, which is to act in the best interests of the British people.
Where do you assess the chances of there being a deal struck before the end of the transition period versus no deal?
Well, I'm, as I always say, I watch what the hands are doing, not what the mouth is saying. And I think with Boris, it's very difficult to watch both, because they seem to move very quickly. So one has to say that historically, I've always listened to what they say and been disappointed by the outcome. I've been encouraged by the fact that at least we are now taking steps to put sticking plasters on the deficiencies and prepare in some way for no deal. Do I think that the establishment has the stomach for no deal? I think they're frightened of it, and I think it goes against their sort of globalist view of the world. So if they can, they will avoid it. But I'm clear that no deal is by far the best deal for us. So what happens now, Michael, I honestly don't know. I hope and pray that they're true to the words that they're speaking now, and that they are going to effectively force Europe to either accept what is logical and fair or leave with no deal. That's what we should be doing. And as I say, responsible government on both sides of the channel would say, let's do a deal that's sensible for Europe and for all of our people. We're not enemies. We're supposed to be friends and allies. After all, you know, we won Europe's freedom for them on more than one occasion in the last 100 years.
Rupert, I just want to change topic now, because you've been quite outspoken when it comes to the media. And of course, channels like Westminster are surging in terms of the views, guys. And by the way, if you do enjoy our content here on the Westminster channel, remember to click subscribe and the bell so you don't miss future videos. But Rupert, you've basically pointed out a comment from Lord Sugar recently that went out on ITV. You said about him, you're speaking for an awful lot of people when you say you're sick and tired of the media. We all know it's awful, current, obviously, coronavirus crisis. We all know it's awful. We don't need to be reminded of that every time we switch on the bloody TV on. Rupert, I quite agree. Why do you think the mainstream media has taken this turn?
First of all, I much enjoy Alan Sugar. I knew him when we were both sitting around the Premier League table together, he representing Tottenham and me Southampton. So he's got a huge amount of common sense. And when somebody like him says what he said, I think we should all listen. And I don't disagree with one word he said. I should declare my interest, just in case anybody thinks I'm biased. You know, I have had my phones hacked and been compensated for it. I have had to fight 2 libel trials, both of which I won. So I've got first-hand experience of the British media. I mean, in football, they control effectively the English football game, and many football games are won off the pitch by the bias that is spread through the media and the sports pages. So, you know, you've got your smaller clubs are described as struggling and the big clubs are described as wonderful. So the players go on the pitch and, you know, one thinks they're wonderful, one thinks they're struggling. And as a result, that affects the outcome of the game. And it's a bit like that with now the mainstream media, which has become so negative in terms of almost everything that is reported every day, particularly on this coronavirus. So, I mean, Lord Sugar is right. What we need is, I think other countries do this better than us. And Sir Mick Davis wrote a very good article in the Telegraph today where he said he'd been in Switzerland and, you know, there isn't all this negativity. People do accept the fact that coronavirus is potentially a problem. They do wear their masks. They are socially responsible. And at the end of the day, there doesn't appear to be any undue worry and fear, but there is a sensible response to try and minimize the risk. And I think if we're not very careful, Michael, there's going to be so much more damage done by this fear factor which is being forced around. I think there was at the beginning of the lockdown maybe a need to instill the importance in people that, you know, they should social distance and they should take normal logical measures to minimize the risk of this plague, as I call it, spreading. So now, though, we've got into this rut where you know, we're watching this, if you almost dictatorship by ministerial sort of diktat. And it's quite extraordinary. They are changing. First of all, they locked down too late. Now they're sort of changing their view every 5 minutes. You know, you've got, as Sir Mick said, the pubs open before the schools went back. I mean, there is absolutely no logic to what's happening. And in the end, any sensible, logical society has to do things by guidance. This is if you believe in a free liberal state. It does it by guidance. Basically, by appealing to people to be responsible, socially responsible. And that's what we should be doing. If we get this wrong, we're going to lose far more people from cancer, which is now not being diagnosed and not being treated. We're going to lose far more people to mental health problems, because the unnatural life that we're all leading now is definitely going to have legacy effects on all of us going forward. So we do need now to get the economy back to normal. I mean, a healthy society has a good economy. There is no question about that. And we are heading for the end of furlough. We're potentially heading for major problems in the private sector. The public sector is far too big now relative to the private sector. So what we're seeing again is more weighting towards the public sector, which to my knowledge hasn't been furloughed. People haven't lost their jobs yet. We haven't seen the cuts that we're going to have to see, because in the end, the public sector is a function of the private sector. It serves, that's why they're called civil servants. And if there isn't a private sector that's vibrant, that's entrepreneurial, and that's creating wealth, there's no necessity for the dead weight of the public sector. So the media's got to be more responsible. Sadly, in this country, as you know, I've got to be in my bonnet about the BBC, which, it is a monopoly, whichever way you look at it. You're forced to pay the license fee of £157.50. If you don't pay it, then you get a criminal record, and in extremis, you go to prison. And this BBC that we've got is not representative of the British people anymore. It's become an extremely dangerous influence on almost everything that we listen to and we read in all BBC matters. Ultimately, monopolies go wrong, and the BBC's gone badly wrong. Now, and I keep being told it's a national treasure and everything else, if it's such a national treasure, let it stand on its own 2 feet, let it effectively become a subscription service, and let it justify this national treasure status by standing on its own 2 feet. We do not need a national state broadcasting monopoly in the form of the BBC. They are a malign influence now on Britain, and we need to defund the BBC.
Have you always felt that way, Rupert? Because a lot of people are saying, decades ago, they really looked at the BBC in a far different way to what they do now. Do you think this is because of the BBC bias? Do you just think it's because of technology and the alternatives are now out there? How do you assess why there is now this movement to defund the BBC?
Well, I think what's happened, the BBC it's been in existence a long time now. I think it was sort of 1921 or something. It formed sometime around then. So it's been going a long time. It wasn't originally funded by this forced license fee. It was actually funded by a royalty on the sale of radio handsets, certain radio handsets. So there was a royalty every time somebody bought a radio that effectively funded the BBC. Now, I think when it's to set up first, the idea was probably a good idea, in that there is a logic for an unbiased news service that provides the British people with, if you like, honest, historically correct sort of news, which has not been in any way politically interfered with. And that, a lot of people who listen to the World Service, that's what they value. During the war, that's what people valued. They didn't want, Emily Maitlis giving her political opinion. What they wanted was just the pure news. They're quite capable then of forming their own view of what the news meant. They didn't need somebody telling them. So there is a logic to a national unbiased news service. There is no logic now to this monstrous organization, which employs, by the way, I think 22,000 full-time people. And if you take the part-time and the other related employees, it's somewhere like 33,000. So, I mean, it's a massive state monopoly. It's become arrogant. The head of it, I think, is now no longer representative of the common sense that I think the British people have. It's highly biased. It's become a very, very left-wing, unrepresentative organization. It tries to create envy. It tries to create division. It tries to do all the things that, you and I are talking about now. We need now to heal those divisions. We don't need to have envy. What we need to have is united ambition to take our country forward and to create, if you like, wealth, stability and security for the next generation. And it's the next generation that's going to suffer from the mistakes that are being made now. And make no mistake, there are a lot of mistakes being made. So this is where we are. And what we've got to do is get people to accept the fact that in the end, they're responsible for their own lives. We all have a duty to respect and work together with other people, but it's got to be done from the individual up. It can't be done from top down.
Well, Rupert, in terms of the media, you know, that's why they're looking for alternatives like Westminster. So that's why we're surging. So I thank those that are watching. Remember to click subscribe and the thumbs up and the bell so you don't miss the next video. Rupert, I'm sure we'll speak again soon. Thanks for joining the channel.
You're doing a great job, Michael. Keep going.
Cheers.